Hello, Business 270 students. This is Professor Hassey for one last time. Well, I actually have a video after this one as well, this weekend. But one last week of our Business 270 Business Statistics course. This is week number 8 as we conclude our quick study of business statistics. This week we have one graded work, our final examination. I'll be going over that in this video. We'll be wrapping up our studies of business statistics, and I want to commend you all on hanging in there over this online class. Online study is not easy to manage it, to deal with it in different shapes and forms, and I thank you all for participating and being engaged during this course of our session. At the same time, I want to make sure that you finish up on a strong foot, and we have a few some extra work still to do over the next couple days. I will be placing a video on Saturday to wrap up the course and answer and have any questions or any concerns of students that I hear about in the next few days to wrap that up on this weekend. So there'll be one more video to go. Also remember Thursday, October 13th, our office hours, student hours from 6 to 9, if you have any questions or concerns about the material. Let's take a look at our Blackboard and make sure we understand where we're at coming into these final days of our course. Okay, a couple of points to make sure everybody is aware of what's going on. I have posted all the grades for the class up to this point in time at the beginning of week 8. Please review your grade point average, your cumulative average. You can go to your report card and click on that and find out where you stand. Also, if you have any holes, if there's some assignments that you have yet to complete and have yet to finish, please contact me and let me know your intentions so we can work it out and make sure you finish up on a strong note and your grade point average. That is important to do in the next couple of days. Don't wait till Sunday night to figure all this out. Remember, all work needs to be posted by Sunday, October 16th at midnight. And that's when the Blackboard is blocked out for any additional uploads. The Blackboard site will be open forever. You'll have access to this information forever. But able to upload files, that will be blocked at midnight this Sunday. So please get in contact with me if you have any issues. Schedule a Zoom meeting with me, communicate. Let's wrap this up on a positive note and get you a good grade and good value out of this course. So make sure you look at where you stand in this course. First of all, our examination is now posted to the examination file folder. There it is, final examination. It's covering chapters 8, 10 through 14. And you download those two. There's two files, both the same file. One's a PDF version, the other's a Word doc version. You're probably familiar with that routine by now. And so complete your work. And also at the same time, the last page of the examination is a link to do your course evaluations. And I'll talk about that in a little minute. So that's your final work for this week in the final examination section. Final examination concerns topics from 10 through chapters 8, 10 through 14. All that material is in weeks 4, 5, 6, and 7 in your file folders if you want to review that material or research it as you're doing the questions. In week 8 file folder for this week, there's our learning assignments. The course concludes, and there's just some information, a final video about the confidence interval of a population. And there again, here's our link to do our course evaluation. So they're in multiple places that you have. And the reason why I do this is, again, the course evaluation and you providing it is anonymous. Nobody knows who you are, and it doesn't play any significance in your grade or anything in that. It's just an independent evaluation by yourself, the student, on the program, on the professor, on the course, on everything. And we like your opinions. Your opinions help us. I know I enjoy the opinions. They make a big difference to me in how I prepare from one course to the other. So please complete the evaluation link. It really supports the program, and it probably doesn't do you any good, but it makes the program better. I know some of you think, well, I've been honest before in course evaluations and nothing changes. That professor's still here and there's whatever. Please, in my case and in my example, I learn from the evaluations. I take note of them. I know our dean, Emmeline DePillis, looks at the evaluations. I know our provost, Karab Janoinian, looks at the evaluations. So please, people do listen and are eager to hear your opinions about our program. So please complete that evaluation. All you do is click on this link and up you go. It should take you about 5 minutes to do, and I appreciate that. And again, it means nothing about your grade. It has influences nothing. The results aren't posted for about 2 months after the class is closed. So nobody knows anything for about 2 months about how you evaluated. So please take some time and do that as you wrap up the course this weekend and into next week. You have until the 20th to do your, the 18th to do your evaluations. It says here the 21st, which is the university setting, but I want to get your grades to you as quick as possible, and I want to get your grades to you by Thursday the 20th. So that's why I put the cutoff of the 18th for the evaluations. So there's that. So please take a look at that and finish up your course on a strong note, and I appreciate that. Another couple of things to note is that and I said it just briefly earlier, as we go forward and as you complete your studies in this course, this Blackboard site will remain open. I know sometimes professors shut down Blackboard sites at the end of a class. This Blackboard site will be open indefinitely. So if you take other courses, you want to show somebody what you did or whatever, this site, it will be open for you as a student as long as you are around. So please note that, and please take advantage of having that information available. And here is our final examination, and I want to walk through it a little bit. It's designed to take you about an hour and a half of your time this week to finish this up. It's covering over key concepts and material of the final 4 or 5 chapters of our course. It also is asking you to do a little research into the textbook or into some material that we've covered and find the answer. But it's a good way of wrapping up the course. Remember, as we said, this 8-week class has been a combination of different ways of assessing you. Examinations, papers, calculations, that sort of thing. But it's to give you a base of what the basic statistics are to use in a business setting. As business administration and business majors, you are being asked to learn marketing, accounting, finance, all different types of disciplines of business. And statistics is, even though not too exciting, is the core of all this. It's using data, understanding data to explain a strategy or to explain a potential strategy that you may use. So that's why this is important to have. So first of all, we start off with some multiple choice questions that basically are definitions of materials, and this follows a chronological order. So the first few questions are from chapter 10, then it goes to chapter 11 and 12, 13, 14. So just so you're aware of that, they do file a chronological order of the chapters reading. So they are definitions, basically definitions. So all you do is you pick the correct answer, the best answer that you think, and just circle it, highlight it, just note it so I can see your interpretation of that question. And again, it's just defining, in this case, it's a question about understanding what the level of significance is and understanding what that number would be. Also, there's some additional definitions of what a statistic result is, Z, T, P, DF. What is that represent as what type of test statistic that is? Again, definitions, all from your textbook, all from our discussions in our online setting. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. There are 8 multiple choice questions for you to answer. Then we get into a calculation question that also is it's input into a multiple choice format because I want to give you different options. And so I want you to calculate, in this case, What is the standard error of the mean, knowing, and I'll read it. Bones Brothers and Associates prepare individual tax returns. Over prior years, Bones and Brothers has maintained careful records regarding the time to prepare a return. Speaking from being a former businessman in the finance accounting world, this is an important, this really exists, is how long does it take you to service a client? And that how long it basically sets the billing rate and sets how many resources you allocate to preparing those business or those customer related issues. The mean time to prepare a tax return for this company is 90 minutes. In other words, the average time to prepare a tax return is 90 minutes. And the population standard deviation of this distribution is 28 minutes. All right, remember, what is the definition of standard deviation? And that is 28 minutes. Suppose 100 returns from this year are selected and analyzed regarding the preparation time. What is the standard error of the mean? So 90 minutes is the mean average. The standard deviation of that is 28 minutes. What would be the error based on 100 returns of the mean? 28 minutes, 280 minutes, 2.8 minutes, 90 minutes. That's what I'm looking for there. And this has to do with hypotheses. Sales at a fast food restaurant averaged $6,000 a day. The restaurant decided to introduce an advertising campaign to increase daily sales. To determine the effectiveness of the advertising campaign, a sample of 49 days of sales were taken. They found that the average daily sales were $6,300 a day. From past history, the restaurant knew that its population standard deviation is about $1,000. The level of significance is 0.025. Have sales increased as a result of the advertising campaign? So there we go. Have sales increased from just looking at that, they've gone from $6,000 to $6,300, but also they found that the standard deviation of that sample is $1,000. With a level significance of 0.025, have the sales increased by the result of this new strategy in advertising? So you have to determine whether to reject or accept the hypothesis that sales have increased. And I give you 4 options there, and that's what I'm looking for. Pick one of those options to explain that situation. So you can see a pattern here in some of our questions with this final as we wrap up the course, is I'm taking real world business situation and applying statistics to help us develop the strategy or what is the correct analysis of the data. So using business events and using the skills of statistics to test out and make sure it's reasonable. It makes sense. And then finally, part 3 is written interpretations. Now here I'm looking for a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, not long, short and sweet. Please define in this question, define an F statistics. What does this statistics describe about analysis? What does this describe? That's poor English there. What does describe about an analysis? What does the F statistics describe about an analysis? 1 or 2 paragraphs. Maybe in this one, we only need about 1. That's from chapter 12. Then in chapter 13, I want you to explain to me, in a regression analysis, what is the predictor variable called? In a regression analysis, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. What is the predictor variable called? And then please define the coefficient of correlation. And that's the last heavy duty statistical definition you need to move on in this course, is please define the coefficient correlation. Again, maybe 2 paragraphs, 2 short paragraphs for this answer. And that's it. So those 13 questions, a combination of multiple choice, calculation, and then pick the correct answer, and then written interpretations, both about 1 or 2 paragraphs long. And that should wrap up your study here in statistics, and be able to move on to accounting, finance, marketing, because we use all of these types of influences and disciplines from statistics in those courses. And then one final opportunity to link to the evaluations. This is dangerous by the professor here. Here I'm asking you to evaluate the course and me as soon as you finish an examination. That could be a little ugly, but I can take it. Don't worry about it. So there's one last attempt to click on that and do the evaluation of our class. I would, again, appreciate that. So that concludes our work. That's the examination. Again, I will be available for our student hours on Thursday evening from 6 to 9 if you have any questions about that. And also, I'll be around all weekend. This is a weekend where I have a lot of classes at writing final papers and examinations. And please, I'll be available. If you need me, send me a text, 626-818-8652. Please, when you do send me that text at 626-818-8652, you also indicate your name and the class that you are in, because I have multiple classes this fall. And if I can't immediately see where you are, what class, how did I relate that to your question or concern, it slows down the process a little bit. So make sure you do that. But if you email me and requesting a Zoom interview or a Zoom appointment, or email me some questions, I stand ready, and hopefully we'll get back to you within no later than a couple hours to get that information back to you, unless you email me at midnight, and then I'll get back to you the next morning. Okay, so that's how we are going forward. I think one thing that drives our final week of study of statistics is the relationship of, now in the first 5-6 weeks of our course, we mainly looked at one relationship. What is the mean of a series of numbers, or what is the standard deviation of one series of numbers? But in the last couple of weeks of our studies, we're looking at the relationship between two different areas of information, or two different possible results or uses of data. And that's a key, and it's called correlation analysis, a group of techniques to measure the relationship between two variables. And that gives you options. For example, here's an example. Does the amount health tech spend per month on training its sales force affect sales? We have a question like this on the examination. In other words, we spend a certain amount of money in our sales force. Do we expect sales to increase because we're putting more resources into our sales force? Does the number of hours students study for an exam influence the exam score? I mean, somebody's always telling you, especially in the faculty, if you put another extra hour or two into this class, you're probably going to do you'll get a better grade. Well, is that true? Is that statement true? That's a correlation analysis to determine whether that statement is true. Does that make sense? Is a faculty member just giving you a hill of beans there, or does that really make sense? And is it proven that if I do spend an extra hour or two on a class, I will get a better score, maybe from a B to an A? But if you're going to tell me that, I want to make sure that's a true statement. Or if I'm going to work for health techs and I'm on the board of directors of a company, and they say we like to request another $100,000 to put into our sales force to make it better, we guarantee that it's going to influence and increase our monthly sales. Yeah, prove it. Show me it. Prove it. And that's what correlation analysis is, to explain that relationship. More spending, higher sales. More hours, better grades. That's what correlation analysis is. And that's a key in statistics, is using analytical data to prove a theory. Okay. And many times we begin that with a scatter diagram, where we have a sales representative making sales calls and how many copiers that sales representative sold. So we put that, oops, I'm jumping ahead here, sorry. So we put that into a scattergram saying, all right, sales calls and sales and copies sold. Well, notice here, as you can kindly see, the more sales calls there are, the more sales increase. So if a sales rep makes more calls, they're probably going to sell more copiers. So there's something involved there that says, that probably is a correlation. And I know it kind of makes sense. If you put more hours or more calls, hopefully you'll probably make more sales. But I want to make sure that exists. So here, North American Copier Sales sells copiers to businesses of all sizes throughout the United States and Canada. The new national sales manager is preparing for an upcoming sales meeting and would like to impress upon the sales reps the importance of making an extra sales call each day. So she takes a random sample of 15 sales reps. She just goes ahead and picks randomly 15 sales reps and gathers information on the number of sales calls made during the month and the copiers they were sold. And here's a scattergram of that. All right. A scattergram meaning you just plot in dots the number of sales calls and the number of copiers sold. So you plot that out. And notice you can see a trend here pretty much. Well, what's the correlation coefficient of that? Well, it measures the strength of this scattergram. So it takes the correlation between one way of thinking and another way of thinking, and it ranges from -1 to 1 to see if there's a correlation. If it's -1, means there's a negative correlation. It means the number of calls does not equate or is incorrect to correlate to the number of sales or copier sales. If it's a 1 correlation, that means that if you make more calls, you will sell more. And if there's a 0 correlation, it means it has no association whatsoever. The number of sales calls does not increase copiers. There's no association. So a correlation coefficient is trying to measure the strength of the relationship in this example between sales calls and copiers sold. So in other words, if we take a correlation analysis and put it into a plot, a scattergram, you would be able to plot the various different examples here. And notice, as you can see here, that in a positive correlation, very similar to our sales calls and copiers, this is a strong correlation because as you can see, it's trending up. It's trending up from bottom right, left to top right. It's trending up. Where here, this is a negative correlation where it's trending, it's going every which way. Some are high here, low. And in here, they're all over the whole breadth of the relationship. So there's no correlation. So this is what we're trying to see here is what is this correlation? And this is a scatter graph of a positive correlation and showing how effective a strategy is. And as you go forward in your business career, in your professional career, you will be asked questions as a manager of people, as a manager of strategies. If we do it this way, what's going to happen as the result of that? And you can use statistics based on prior trends and prior strategies to say, yeah, it's been a trend and it's usually a strong correlation that if we do put more effort into our sales calls, we will sell more copiers. Or if we put more effort into our customers and develop customers relationships and customer methods of keeping our customers happy, we'll have return customers and we'll do better. Or if we have better professors who spend more time with students and develop strong academic syllabuses and way of teaching, we'll retain more students and our students will be more successful in the real world because they've learned more and received more value out of the program. Do these correlate or do they not? And that's a very key strategy in business. If we decide to do it this way, are the results going to be positive or negative? Well, naturally, we want to determine the strategies that are positive. And that's what chapter 13 is all about, to understand that correlation coefficient. And in business, you want to have a positive correlation. The strategy affects it appropriately. So going back to the copier company, let's take a look at this. Here's that scattergram of those 15 people. All right. 96 calls. That was the total number of calls. average, and 45 copiers. So what is the correlation coefficient determined for this copy? We begin the scattering. By this time, we draw a vertical line from 96 to 45. And so we're putting the data into different quadrants. And then we put those quadrants into a format. Now, I'm not asking you to do this. I'm just showing you how this all works. We put it into a formula, and we come up with a R, which is a correlation coefficient of 0.865. Remember, the correlation goes from negative 1.0 to positive 1.0. So this correlation coefficient is positive 0.865, pretty close to 1. That's telling us this is positive data, positive strategy of more calls and more sales from this sample, meaning it's a good data, a good positive data. And again, it's showing the calculations here. Okay. And determining our correlation coefficient. Again, you do not have to be responsible for this, but just understand that as I look at data and their means and means in relationship to the data, we can do a lot of determination whether that strategy will work. That's pretty good. So again, the mean of this data, and I'll go back one, the mean is 96 calls and 45 copiers sold. That's the mean. So how do we defer from 96 and 45 throughout this sample is what this calculation is determining. So the mean is 45, 96. So we take the difference between 96 and 96 is 0. The difference between 41 and 45 is -4. And then we multiply those together, and we get this total 6.62 variance. Apply that to this formula, and there we go, 0.865. And there's great templates in Excel to do this automatically for you. But again, we're taking the comparison of all these sales reps to the average, which is 95, 96, to the average of copiers sold, 45, taking the variance of those calls and copiers to the mean, filling out the correlation of that in this formula, and it's positive 0.865. So the data is strong. So the key point I wanted you to get out of chapter 13 is understanding that if we do have a strategy, and by looking at the results of that strategy to the averages, to the mean, we can determine whether that strategy was positive, in this case, 0.865, or negative. And if it was negative, it means that strategy is negatively affected by that strategy, by those results. It's wrong. Or if we have a positive correlation, meaning that if we do make more sales calls, we will sell more copiers. And that would be a positive of that hypothesis to prove that. So that's what correlation coefficient is. And finally, in chapter 14, one last concept, very similar to chapter 13. Remember chapter 13, we just looked at sales calls and copiers sold. All right, two variables there. Chapter 14 is the same setup, but multiple variables, multiple strategies, multiple ways that it can happen. Here's an example. Salisbury Realty sells homes along the East Coast of the United States. One question frequently asked by prospective buyers is, how much can we expect to pay to heat the home in the winter? So if we want to sell a house on the East Coast, how much is it going to cost us to heat the sucker once we buy it? Well, the research department of this realty company thinks 3 variables relate to heating costs. Whereas remember in chapter 13, the only variable was the more we sell, the more we make calls, the more sales calls we make, the more we sell. Here, there's 3 variables related to the strategy. 3 variables that relate to heating: the mean daily outside temperature, the number of inches of insulation in the home, and the age of the furnace. These all drive whether and how much you're going to pay for heat a home in the winter, what's the outside temperature, how much insulation you have in your house, and how old is your furnace. Taking all that into account, can we honestly say this will be a good idea and what to expect for heating cost and total heat for a house in the East Coast? Put all those together. And that's what multiple regression analysis, and that enough to make your head spin just thinking about that. But in a business sense, in a business question, it makes sense. For example, this is done all the time at the University of Laverne. Why are you choosing University of Laverne to go to school? And usually there's three variables to that one. One, the cost. The cost. The cost is a determining factor of why I choose Laverne. The second variable is the reputation and the brand of the program. And the third variable is how does this schedule fit into my schedule? My work schedule, my home schedule, the scheduling, and does it fit? And I have enough time to do this properly, the education. So the cost, the brand of the program, and its schedule, those are the three factors that drive students picking Laverne. And our admissions office knows that. The bad thing about it is we hired consultants at $10,000 an hour to tell us about this when all you had to do was ask Professor Hassey, who teaches statistics. I could have found this out for you no matter what. But such is life. But at the same time, this is part of business. Why are you going to want to buy a house here? Well, how much does it cost me to heat the sucker? Well, a lot depends on the weather outside. A lot depends on how the house is built, insulation, and a lot depends on how's the quality of the heating system. Put all those together, and we can make an argument about selling our home on the East Coast. And that's multiple regression analysis. So I need you to understand that definition. Again, I'm not going to ask you. So notice here, kind of like what we did with copier and copy sales, heating cost, outside temperature, insulation, and years of the furnace. And hopefully we're trying to find a correlation. Your heating costs will drop down if the temperature goes up, you have more insulation, and your furnace is younger. We're trying to find that relationship, which kind of makes sense. And here's the answer. We estimate based on all this data that the average heating costs are $276.56. Based on all this data with a mean outside temperature of 30 degrees, 5 inches of insulation, and a furnace that's 10 years old. In other words, all that data of all those homes, this is the average. The average outside temperature is 30. The average home has 5 inches of insulation, and the average furnace is 10 years old in this housing area. So based on all that, $276.56 of our average heating costs. Well, there's a good number to use in sales. If you buy this home, a typical home in our development, this is what your heating costs are going to be. And this is the analysis to do that. So as you can see, just think about the workplace that you're in now or in your own everyday life. I could make a decision of buying a house or buying a copier or whatever, or going to school based on gathering averages of data throughout an analysis and then pooling that data into a regression analysis and telling me, what does all this mean? Well, it means in the case of this problem, it's going to cost you about $277 a month on average to heat your house in this area of the country. That's good information to know. And it's good information to know for the people who are selling the houses. Maybe if they want to make that better, replace the furnaces. Put one more layer of insulation in. Now you can't move, it's outside temperature, you can't change. But maybe change the types of houses that you're selling to lower the cost to attract more customers. So that is the important part to make out, and that's why this is called business statistics. Using data to explain a strategy or to explain a marketing or selling point. Buy a house here, it's going to cost you $277 on average. Now, I'm not guarantee that cost, but based on our data of all these samples, this is what it comes up. And that's a regression analysis. One last thing, and this is for definition purposes only, we use what is called a ANOVA table to summarize regression analysis, to summarize those findings that we just saw in regards to the furnaces. It's called a ANOVA table, and it gives us an F statistic to show us the degree and the reliability of that information. And it's called a multiple standard estimate. Again, you don't have to know these. But for this data, excuse me, I'm jumping ahead here. For this data about the furnace, it tells us if we put all this into an analysis of determining a level of estimate or error, that we have basically a pretty good idea that our error estimate is putting our numbers into about a $51.05 error estimate. In other words, we say it's going to cost us $276 a month to heat, but that's plus or minus 50 bucks, $51. I don't know if that's a very good error estimate. That's a lot of money. It can go either way, 51 bucks, higher or lower. But that's a statistic that people will use to determine that. And is there a correlation to all this number? Well, look at the correlation. It's 0.804. That tells you that this is a pretty reliable and positive relationship, which kind of makes sense. Heating costs are going to be based on temperature, insulation, and furnace. So it kind of makes sense that this would be a positive correlation of all these three variables. 80%, pretty good. Okay, so I wanted the key thing of this is thank God, well, maybe some of you might like to do this, is to calculate, but to understand what we mean by taking a look at multiple or variables to explain a strategy, plus or minus, positive or negative, or no association of alternatives to a strategy and whether that's successful or not, or what alternatives of variables of outcomes influence the strategy of selling homes on the East Coast. So that's the point of all this. And every day, risk managers, accountants, internal auditors, financial risk managers take a look at these measures of effectiveness, these correlation coefficients within the strategies of their company, and correlate that to making sure the people who are making the strategies understand the positive or negativeness of their decision making. And this is a part of business day in and day out. Now, for large corporations, they have offices to do this, statistical or data analytics. But in smaller business, they usually hire their public accounting firms, the people who do their audits, to do this analysis as well. And it's called data analytics. Analyzing strategic decisions and their outcomes. Correlation of coefficient. Regression analysis. And when you first take a look at those words, you go, oh, I don't even want to know what's going on there. But when you take a look at it in these two examples we've used today, copiers and copier and sales calls, and cost of heating a house with three associated variables, it kind of makes sense. Okay. So as we go forward into this week number 8, you have your examination, and some of you need to clean up some holes in your assignments and post all your data and make sure you get everything in. Take a look at your grade point average and take a look at where you stand in this class. You have until Sunday to sort all that out. Get a hold of your professor, me, and make sure I understand what you're doing and explaining to you the ramifications of what you're trying to do and getting all these grades in and accounted for. And do all that in the next few days. And by Sunday, we'll wrap up the course. I will have a closing video posted on Saturday to wrap up the course and make sure everybody, any loose open items that I hear about through questioning, and then we'll conclude the course. And also another point to remember, and I will talk about this on Saturday, is please, even though this course is ending, and it's a quick course, 8 weeks, I want you to think about including me in your network of somebody you can call on for questions, answers, for recommendations. Please think about that as you go forward after this class, is using me as a network or using this information as a network to help you with your career, with your further studies. And please include me in that information source for you. And I'll talk more about that in my Saturday video. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you one more time this weekend. Adios.